Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change in full effect today here in Los Angeles. Currently, where I reside, it is 112. See that? I guess that just looks backwards, right, to your screen. So that doesn't help you, does it? Where I had a band rehearsal a couple hours ago, and where I was at, it was 115 with a heat index or heat real feel of 120. If that doesn't just burn your socks off or burn your britches off, I don't know, one of those. It's hot. It's hot, people. I don't know what else to say about it. Going to go through a couple of articles for you. Just to raise the alarm a little higher. So let's talk about this heat wave. Heat wave breaks records across Southern California. The weekend is off to a very hot start with record-breaking temperatures across several communities in Southern California on Friday. Downtown Los Angeles, I'm going to assume that was a firework. Downtown Los Angeles shattered its record at 10:15 a.m. with 95 degrees, according to the National Weather Service. Forecast calls for a high of 106 degrees later in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Woodland Hills, which is where I was, shattered its daily record with 115 degrees. Federal meteorologists said a high temperature of 117 is expected later in the day. Whoa. It's getting serious. It's getting real out here. In Ventura County, the city of Camarillo broke its daily record high with 92 degrees, and Oxnard with 86 degrees. Forecasters expect a record-breaking 115 degrees in Van Nuys, 113 in Burbank, 110 in Palmdale, and 106 in Long Beach. The extreme heat was posing a challenge for firefighters battling multiple brush fires, including the Box Fire, burning near Cajon Pass. The blaze had charred approximately 100 acres by early afternoon. Officials said residents without access to air conditioning are encouraged to seek relief from the heat at various public facilities being used as cooling centers across LA County. More information about those centers is available at lacounty.gov/heat or by calling 211. I knew that the fires were going to start because that's just what happens. If it gets in the hundreds in Los Angeles, expect a fire right around the mountain from you. Moving on to global warming, maybe twice what climate models predict. This is from the UNSW Sydney newsroom from July 5th. A new study based on evidence from past warm periods suggests global warming may be double what is forecast. Future global warming may eventually be twice as warm as projected by climate models, and sea levels may rise 6 meters or more if the world meets the 2°C target, according to an international team of researchers from 17 countries. I'm sorry about the lag in the video between my talking and the reading of the articles. Again, when I have all these articles open, it like eats up a lot of bandwidth, not only in my Wi-Fi, but also just eats up the RAM in my computer. So because I have all these articles open, I guess maybe I can close when I'm not reading. Excuse me. I think that one is eating up a lot of space. And anyways, it's eating up memory and it's causing my video to lag out. So I apologize for that. Trying to see if I can get it to catch up. Are we there yet? Is it synced up? It's almost synced up, but not quite. Moving on back to Mhm. I know what's going on. Okay. The findings, the findings published last week in Nature Geoscience are based on observational evidence from 3 warm periods over the past 3.5 million years, when the world was 0.5 C to 2 C warmer than the pre-industrial temperatures of the 19th century. The research also revealed how large areas of the polar ice caps could collapse, and significant changes to ecosystems could see the Sahara Desert become green and edges of tropical forests turn into fire-dominated savanna. Observations of past warming periods suggest that a number of amplifying mechanisms, which are poorly represented in climate models, increase long-term warming beyond climate model projections, said lead author Professor Hubertus Fischer of the University of Bern. This suggests the carbon budget to avoid 2C of global warming may be far smaller than estimated, leaving very little margin for error to meet the Paris targets. So again, we're having scientists coming on over to the realization that we are in big, big trouble. To get the results, the researchers looked at 3 of the best documented warm periods: the Holocene thermal maximum, 5 to 9,000 years ago, the last interglacial, 129 to 116,000 years ago, and the mid-Pliocene warm period, 3 million years ago. The warming of the first 2 periods was caused by predictable changes in the Earth's orbit, while the mid-Pliocene event was the result of atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations that were 350 to 450 parts per million, much the same as today. Combining a wide range of measurements from ice cores, sediment layers, fossil records dating using atomic isotopes, and a host of other established paleoclimate methods, the researchers pieced together the impact of these climatic changes. In combination, these periods give strong evidence of how a warmer Earth would appear once the climate has stabilized. By contrast, today our planet is warming much faster than any of these periods as human-caused carbon dioxide emissions continue to grow. Even if our emissions stop today, it would take centuries to millennia to reach equilibrium. The changes to the Earth under these past conditions were profound. There were substantial retreats of the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets, and as a consequence, sea levels rose by at least 6 meters. Marine plankton, that's 18 feet if you're counting at home in America. Marine plankton ranges shifted, reorganizing entire marine ecosystems. The Sahara became greener, and forest species shifted 200 kilometers toward the poles, as did tundra. High-altitude species declined. Temperate tropical forests were reduced, and in Mediterranean areas, fire-maintained vegetation dominated. Even with just 2C of warming and potentially 1.5 C, just 1.5 C, significant impacts on the Earth system are profound, said co-author Professor Alan Mix of Oregon State University. We can expect that sea level rise could become unstoppable for millennia, impacting much of the world's population, infrastructure, and economic activity. Yes, these significant observed changes are generally underestimated in climate model projections that focused on the near term. Compared to these past observations, climate models appear to underestimate long-term warming and the amplification of warmth in polar regions. Climate models appear to be trustworthy for small changes, such as for low-emission scenarios over short periods, say over the next few decades out to 2100, but as the change gets larger or more persistent, either because of higher emissions, for example, as a business-as-usual scenario, or because we are interested in the long-term response of a low-emission scenario, it appears they underestimate climate change, said co-author Professor Katrin Meissner, director of the University of New South Wales Climate Change Research Center. This research is a powerful call to act. It tells us that if today's leaders don't urgently address our emissions, global warming will bring profound changes to our planet and way of life, not just for the century, but well beyond. Let me rephrase that sentence, or let me fix that sentence. If today's leaders don't urgently dismantle industrial society immediately, industrial civilization, society as we know it, if they don't dismantle it and create a profoundly different way of life for all human beings on Earth, we are toast, and we are toast anyways, as it's looking. But the only way out would be to greatly reorganize the way that we live, decommission all nuclear plants, put all resources to decommissioning nuclear plants and to possibly mitigating all the feedbacks that are already in motion. That would be the only way out. So world leaders aren't doing that, not just addressing emissions, not just talking about 2035 or 2050, literally stopping industrial civilization on a dime, like today, and then saying, okay, now we really have to do something drastic about this. So maybe putting every single scientist, every single black project military scientist on the problem of sucking CO2 out of the air and possibly stalling, putting the brakes on feedbacks. We might, possibly, maybe, might just see a way out. But do you see the word that I used, the optimal word I was using, the important word I was using was drastic. As in, nothing looks the same as it does now. And things will change whether we want them to or not, whether we do it by design or not, because according to Chris Hedges, America shows many signs of impending catastrophic collapse. This is from Russia Insider. Yeah, Russia Insider, you know, they're trying to steal our elections and like take over our government. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Trump administration did not rise prima facie like Venus on a half shell from the sea. Donald Trump is a result of a long process of political, cultural, I was going to say cultural. How about that for a little mashup? And social decay. He is a product of our failed democracy. The longer we perpetuate the fiction that we live in a functioning democracy, there is a fire engine. That Trump and the political mutations around him are somehow an aberrant deviation that can be vanquished in the next election, the more we will hurtle toward tyranny. Thank you, Chris Hedges. Because if you believe that the current batch of Democrats or that the Democratic Party is going to in any way stop our already fascist system from becoming and being the fascist system that it is, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. The problem is not Trump. It is a political system dominated by corporate power and the mandarins of the two major political parties in which we don't count. We will wrest back political control by dismantling the corporate state. And this means massive, sustained civil disobedience, like that demonstrated by teachers around the country this year. If we do not stand up, we will enter a new dark age. The Democratic Party, which helped to build our system of inverted totalitarianism, is once again held up by many on the left as a savior. Yet the party steadfastly refuses to address the social inequality that led to the election of Trump and the insurgency by Bernie Sanders. It is deaf, dumb, and blind to the very real economic suffering that plagues over half the country. It will not fight to pay workers a living wage. It will not defy the pharmaceutical and insurance industries to provide Medicare for all. It will not curb the voracious appetite of the military that is disemboweling the country and promoting the prosecution of futile and costly foreign wars. It will not restore our lost civil liberties, including the right to privacy. freedom from government surveillance, and due process. It will not get corporate and dark money out of politics. It will not militarize our police and reform a prison system that has 25% of the world's prisoners. Although the United States has only 5% of the world's population, it plays to the margins, especially in election seasons, refusing to address substantive political and social problems, and instead focusing on narrow cultural issues like gay rights, abortion, and gun control in our peculiar species of anti-politics. Oh, don't forget the economy, Chris. You always got to talk about the economy. And you might even say, Democrats might even say, a green economy. We need to we need to enhance our green economy, which sounds just really nice. It just makes me feel, really cool all over. This is a doomed tactic, but one that is understandable. The leadership of the party, the Clintons, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Tom Perez, are creations of corporate America. Now the police are rolling down the street. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I heard. I heard like an explosion a couple minutes ago. I don't know if that came over through the speakers, but like the fire engine came down the street and then the police came down the street. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, in an open and democratic political process, one not dominated by party elites and corporate money, these people would not hold political power. They know this. They would rather implode the entire system than give up their positions of privilege, and that, I fear, is what will happen. The idea that the Democratic Party is in any way a bulwark against despotism defies the last 3 decades of its political activity. Thank you, Bill Clinton. It is the guarantor of despotism. Trump has tapped into the hatred that huge segments of the American public have for a political and economic system that has betrayed them. He may be inept, degenerate, dishonest, and a narcissist, but he adeptly ridicules the system they despise. And he keeps on. He keeps on convincing people of a very obvious reality. And as long as Democrats don't defy the system themselves, they will lose. His cruel and demeaning taunts directed to government agencies, laws, and the established elites resonate with people for whom these agencies, laws, and elites have become hostile forces, and for many who see no shift in the political landscape to alleviate their suffering. Trump's cruelty and invective are at least cathartic. Trump, like all despots, has no ethical core. He chooses his allies and appointees based on their personal loyalty and fawning obsequiousness to him. He will sell anyone out. He is corrupt, amassing money for himself. He made $40 million from his Washington, D.C. hotel alone last year and his corporate allies. He is dismantling government institutions that once provided some regulation and oversight. He is an enemy of the open society. This makes him dangerous. His turbocharged assault on the last vestiges of democratic institutions and norms means there will soon be nothing, even in name, to protect us from corporate totalitarianism. But these warnings from the architects of our failed democracy against creeping fascism, Madeleine Albright among them, are risible. They show how disconnected the elites have become from the zeitgeist. None of these elites have credibility. They built the edifice of lies, deceit, and corporate pillage that made Trump possible. And the more Trump demeans these elites, the more they cry out like Cassandras. The more he salvages his disastrous presidency and enables the kleptocrats pillaging the country as it swiftly disintegrates. The press is one of the principal pillars of Trump's despotism. It chatters endlessly like 18th century courtiers at the court of Versailles about the foibles of the monarch while the peasants lack bread. It drones on and on and on about empty topics such as Russian meddling and a payoff to a porn actress that have nothing to do with the daily hell that for many defines life in America. It refuses to critique or investigate the abuses by corporate power, which has destroyed our democracy and economy and orchestrated the largest transfer of wealth upward in American history. The corporate press is a decayed relic that in exchange for money and access committed cultural suicide. And when Trump attacks it over fake news, he expresses once again the deep hatred among all those the press ignores. And when the press keeps churning out fake news, He keeps on looking right. The press worships the idol of Mammon as slavishly as Trump does. It loves the reality show presidency. The press, especially the cable news shows, keeps the lights on and the cameras rolling so viewers can be glued to a 21st century version of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It is good for ratings. It is good for profits, but it accelerates the decline. All of this will soon be compounded by financial collapse. Wall Street banks have been handed $16 trillion in bailouts and other subsidies by the Federal Reserve and Congress at nearly 0% interest since the 2008 financial collapse. They have used this money, as well as the money saved through huge tax cuts imposed last year, to buy back their own stock, raising the compensation and bonuses of their managers and thrusting the society deeper into untenable debt peonage. Sheldon Adelson's casino operations alone got a $670 million tax break under the 2017 legislation. The ratio of CEO to worker pay now averages 339 to 1, the highest gap approaching 5,000 to 1. The circular use of money to make and hoard money is what Karl Marx called fictitious capital. The steady increase in public debt, corporate debt, credit card debt, and student loan debt will ultimately lead, as Nomi Prins writes, to a tipping point when money coming in to furnish that debt or available to borrow simply won't cover the interest payments. Then debt bubbles will pop, beginning with higher yielding bonds. And an economy reliant on debt for its growth causes our interest rate to jump to 28% when we are late on a credit card payment. It is why our wages are stagnant or have declined in real terms. If we earned a sustainable income, we would not have to borrow money to survive. It is why a university education, houses, medical bills, and utilities cost so much. The system is designed so we can never free ourselves from debt. However, the next financial crash, as Prins points out in her book, Collusion, How Central Bankers Rig the World, won't be like the last one. This is because, as she says, there is no plan B. Interest rates can't go any lower. There has been no growth in the real economy. The next time, there will be no way out. Once the economy crashes and the rage across the country explodes into a firestorm, the political freaks will appear, ones that will make Trump look sagacious and benign. And so, to quote Vladimir Lenin, what must be done? We must invest our energy in building parallel popular institutions to protect ourselves and to pit power against power. These parallel institutions, including unions, community development organizations, local currencies, alternative political parties, and food cooperatives will have to be constructed town by town. The elites in a time of distress will retreat to their gated compounds and leave us to fend for ourselves. Basic services, from garbage collection to public transportation, food distribution, and healthcare will collapse. Massive unemployment and underemployment, triggering social unrest, will be dealt with not through government job creation, but the brutality of militarized police and a complete suspension of civil liberties. Critics of the system, already pushed to the margins, will be silenced and attacked as enemies of the state. The last vestiges of labor unions will be targeted for abolition, a process that will soon be accelerated, given the expected ruling in a case before the Supreme Court that will cripple the ability of public sector unions to represent workers. The dollar, and they did so, the dollar will stop being the world's reserve currency, causing a steep devaluation. Banks will close. Global warming will extract heavier and heavier costs, especially on the coastal populations, farming, and the infrastructure, costs that the depleted state will be unable to address. The corporate press, like the ruling elites, will go from burlesque to absurdism. Its rhetoric, so patently fictitious, it will, as in all totalitarian states, be unmoored from reality. The media outlets will all sound as fatuous as Trump. And to quote W.H. Auden, the little children will die in the streets. As a foreign correspondent, I covered collapsed societies, including the former Yugoslavia. It is impossible for any doomed population to grasp how fragile the decayed financial, social, and political system is on the eve of implosion. All the harbingers of collapse are visible: crumbling infrastructure, chronic underemployment and unemployment, the indiscriminate use of lethal force by police, political paralysis and stagnation, an economy built on the scaffolding of debt, nihilistic mass shootings in schools, universities, workplaces, malls, concert venues, and movie theaters, opioid overdoses that will kill some 64,000 people a year, an epidemic of suicides, unsustainable military expansion, gambling as a desperate tool of economic development and government revenue. the capture of power by a tiny corporate clique, censorship, the physical diminishing of public institutions ranging from schools and libraries. All right, I'm going to try and finish this article. My computer actually just totally shut down because it is so hot. I'm inside, I'm in the shade. It is so hot, my computer just completely crashed. So I was here. The physical diminishing of public institutions ranging from schools and libraries to courts and medical facilities. The incessant bombardment by electronic hallucinations to divert us from the depressing sight that has become America and keep us trapped in illusions. We suffer the usual pathologies of impending death. I would be happy to be wrong, but I have seen this before. I know the warning signs. All I can say is, get ready. Excellent article by Chris Hedges. I'm sure you all are familiar with him. I do enjoy his work. Lastly, also want to let you all know my phone died 3 times a day, or overheated 3 times while I was driving in my car in the shade. That's how hot it was. I had to basically turn on the AC so I could like push my phone up against the AC so it would go back on again. Did I mention that it was hot? So lastly, I'm going to read this for what it's worth. Scientists call for a Paris-style agreement to save life on Earth. This is from The Guardian, June 28th. Conservation scientists believe our current mass extinction crisis requires a far more ambitious agreement. Yes, do tell. In the style of the Paris Climate Accord, and they argue that the bill shouldn't be handed just to nation states, but corporations too. Let's be honest, the global community's response to the rising evidence of mass extinction and ecological degradation has been largely to throw crumbs at it. Where we have acted, it's been in a mostly haphazard and modest way. A protected area here, a conservation program there, a few new laws, and a pinch of funding. The problem is such actions, while laudable and important, in no way match the scope and size of the problem, where all markers indicate that life on Earth continues to slide into the dustbin. But a few scientists are beginning to call for more ambition, much more, and they want to see it enshrined in a new global agreement similar to the Paris Climate Accord. They also say that the bill shouldn't just fall on nations, but the private sector too. A global deal for nature. In 2016, E.O. Wilson, arguably the world's most lauded living evolutionary biologist, published a book called Half Earth. So if you all have heard about this idea, here we go again, where he proposed that to save life on Earth and ourselves, we must set aside around half the planet in various types of reserves. Not surprisingly, the idea was immediately controversial. But it was also picked up by other scientists hungry for an ambitious, hopeful way of facing a future of the ecological Armageddon. Last year, 49 scientists wrote a landmark paper exploring how feasible half Earth might be across the Earth's different terrestrial ecosystems. But the headline news of this paper really was this sentence: we propose a global deal for nature, a companion to the Paris Climate Deal, to promote increased habitat protection and restoration, national and eco-region scale conservation strategies, and the empowerment of indigenous people to protect their sovereign land. In less technical parlance, this is a ringing call for a massive global agreement that would look at drastically increasing the amount of the world's covered by parks, in some cases up to the half-Earth goal. And indigenous protected areas. Indigenous people are now widely recognized as some of the best defenders of nature after decades of being sidelined. The new agreement, the authors contend, should embrace the half-Earth, or nature needs half goal. What do y'all think about this idea? I mean, it's, on some levels, it's kind of silly because, you know, what we're doing on the other half is also really, really important, you know. If we have a nuclear power plant meltdown on half the Earth, that may just possibly impact the other half. And I would also like to include the fact that I think, you know, half the Earth should be off limit. Not just half the Earth is like nature preserves, national monuments. Half the Earth should just be off limits, like no go, no tourism, no hiking, no, exploring, possibly some scientists to go, to go check it out, but like no one but indigenous people, if even indigenous. A number of empirical studies are telling us that we need to set aside about half the terrestrial and marine realms to avoid the worst of the two great environmental catastrophes, climate change and the sixth extinction crisis looming on the horizon. Eric Dinerstein, the lead author of the paper, said previously with WWF, Dinerstein is today the director of WildTech and the Biodiversity and Wildlife Solutions Program with the NGO Resolve. Such an agreement would likely fall under the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, first established in 1992 as an international treaty. Today, the CBD meets every 2 years. I don't know if I'm going to read this whole article because I don't know if I have time. Let's go on down and skip through. Well, hold on. Arguably, the largest element holding back greater conservation action worldwide is funding. To date, the money is simply magnitudes less of what is actually required. As with any public good, biodiversity conservation suffers from a free-riding problem in which governments have an incentive to provide less than the optimal level of funding in the hope that others will cover the costs, said Edward Barbier, an economist with Colorado State University, adding, the current global biodiversity crisis is in large part due to the lack of international commitment and funding over the past 25 years. Barbier is the lead author on a new paper suggesting a novel way to ratchet up funds for the other 8 million plus species on the planet. It will take around $100 billion a year to protect the Earth's broad range of animal and plant species, and current funding fluctuates around $4 to $10 billion annually, he said, illustrating the massive shortfall for global conservation. In order to raise $100 billion a year, 10 times more than is currently spent in the very least, Barbier argues that we can't just depend on governments, but must turn to the private sector. He and his co-authors argue that any new agreement through the CBD should create a mechanism that would allow private corporations to join with their own targets and funding goals. But what would compel corporations to sign on? Corporations depend on the health of our ecosystems and are therefore at the risk of losing the very foundations upon which their businesses rely, explained Thomas Dean, co-author of the paper and sustainable development professor at Colorado State University. Growing awareness of this challenge will increasingly motivate corporations to engage. The paper points to industries where biodiversity is vital to their bottom line, such as fisheries, forestry, agriculture, and insurance. For too long, we have viewed corporate and environmental interests as adversarial. However, they need to become aligned if we are to be successful with both economically and environmentally, Dean said. After all, this is the fundamental purpose of an economic system, serving the needs of society in the short and long term. But is protecting 50% of the world even possible? Let's put it this way, it's not impossible. Dinerstein's study last year found that of the 846 ecoregions on land, over 10% of them already have attained 50% protection. Moreover, a number of countries, including Namibia, Bhutan, and Venezuela, are close to 50% protection on land. Dinerstein says the conservationists will have to get creative to reach such an ambitious target, but he believes it can be done. We will have to include semi-intact areas, managed areas, areas under indigenous protection, and probably about 7 to 10% restoration of key areas. Key here is to be strategic and protect the most irreplaceable sites first over the next decade and fill in the rest over the coming years. That doesn't mean every ecoregion can hit 50% target. Some think the tall grass prairies of the US have no chance. Indeed, The study found that 207 of the world's ecoregions have less than 4% habitat left. Dinnerstein says getting to 50% in these areas is delusional, but aiming for 10 to 15% in such habitats via restoration would be a starting place. Such an endeavor would go a long way towards solving another global environmental crisis, climate change. Preserving and restoring forests and other habitats has long been touted as one of the quickest and cheapest ways of decreasing global carbon emissions. Around 15% of global CO2 emissions today are directly tied to forests being chopped down, peatlands drained, or mangroves cleared. If all this sounds like utopian fiction, Dinnerstein pointed to the fact that Chinese scientists have already published a paper on how they could hit 50% protected land in one of the most populous countries on Earth. See, the Chinese are thinking about it, or at least, looking at it. Give it up for the Chinese. Nature needs half is the biggest idea out there, Dinnerstein said, and the only one that could guarantee a future for all life on Earth. It is an interesting idea. And yes, give it up for the Chinese for even thinking about stuff like this. But while they're thinking about it, while they're planting trees, while they're shutting down factories to curb smog problems in certain cities, they are out raping and pillaging for resources all over the world as fast as they can. So those two things are super conflicting. One has to go. Guess which one it is. The idea that corporations are going to save us from themselves or save themselves from themselves is just ridiculousness, high ridiculousness. I don't understand it, but most corporations would have to just go away. Just go away. Just shut your doors, find something else to do, take whatever money and resources you have, and deal with the problem. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Hope to be back tomorrow with another video for you. You can support this channel at the links given below. I will link all these articles in the description box below. And before I go, forgive me, but I couldn't find a way to link the Torstein Vidal post on Facebook, just because I'm being technically challenged right now. Interesting thing, though, I want to talk about this for just 1 second. 3 days ago, he said we're 30 days away from blue ice. Yesterday, he said we're 20 days. In the space of a day, he cut it down by 10 days, 20 days from blue ice. Today, I looked at the very same post. He had updated it to say 10 days. I don't know what to think about this. If y'all are on the Arctic Ice group on Facebook, that's where the post is. If you want to find it, you can just go find it. I think some other people have linked it. Where I found the post, I think was from Kevin Hester, possibly. I think it was. Maybe you can find Kevin Hester's page and go check it out. So 30 days, 20 days, and 10 days. I mean, it's fairly astonishing. And I know that people are like, come on, man, get your head out of your ass or whatever. But I would be concerned about something like this. But, on that kind of a timeline, 30 days, 20 days, 10 days, and 3 days. So what does that actually look like in 5 days? I'll just leave you with that. If I can find a way to link just the actual post, I will do so. I will try to do so in either this video or the last video, maybe both. I'm working on it, but I got to go to work. So I don't really have time to play around with it. Anyways, I hope you'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.